Good afternoon. Welcome to the North Carolina Space Grant Fellowships, Scholarships, and Internships virtual information session. This is for this spring semester. Application system will be open in 2024. So if you are interested in learning about our funding opportunities, you are in the right place. So quickly, I wanted to give folks a quick background of exactly who Space Grant is and what it is that we do. We are a national program. There is a space grant in every state, plus DC, Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands, and Guam. So there is nowhere across the country where you cannot find a space grant. Here in North Carolina, we tailor our programs to the needs of our own state. So for example, across the country, you'll see scholarships, fellowships, and internships and across all of the country. But then here in Carolina, we're able to tailor them to our needs, such as the fact that we're first in flight, or the unique capacities that we have across the various labs and observatories in the state of North Carolina. And we do this in partnership with NASA, the state of North Carolina, NC State University, where our offices are based, as well as at nonprofits and with industry partners across the state. So what is it that we do? Well, if you're like us, you think that what NASA is really cool. I know a lot of you have seen the images coming from the new James Webb Space Telescope. You're hearing about PACE, and other rovers and probes and helicopters that are being sent across the universe. And maybe that's something that inspires you. Maybe you're interested in the planetary health of the planet Earth. But if you're like us, you're inspired by something that NASA wants to do, and you would like to pursue that either through your academic or career pathway. So if this sounds like something that you are or something that you would want to do, please join us. We are interested ultimately in developing the next generation of explorers. So in short, when people ask me what I do, I like to jokingly say I make astronauts, but there is in fact some truth to that. There are two North Carolina Space Grant scholars that are now astronauts. Many of you have heard of astronaut Christina Cook. She's the longest serving female on the International Space Station. She was also the first all-female spacewalk crew. And she is a graduate many times over of NC State University and their engineering programs. And she was an NC Space Grant scholar. Some of you may be hearing shortly about astronaut Zena Cardman. She just got assigned to her first mission. So you'll be seeing her in the news quite a bit moving forward. She's on the science side of the house, and she is a graduate, an undergraduate at UNC Chapel Hill, who also received funding as an NC Space Grant scholar. So you can become an astronaut by being part of NC Space Grant, but we know that not everybody is going to become an astronaut. So what is it that we really want to do? Well, we want to train you. We want you to become the next generation workforce in STEM by giving you the skills that you need to become part of that workforce. And we do this a number of ways. We do this through internships, both with NASA and industry, to give you that hands-on professional experience. We do this through team competitions and challenges, both with NASA associations and industry partners, so that you can gain experience working as part of a team, taking on a certain role as part of a team, and working on your leadership skills. We also do this through what we're going to be talking about today, which is doing some in-depth research on an issue or a factor or something that drives your passion. And we do this through our fellowships and scholarships. So today on this webinar, we are going to be talking about a few of our open opportunities at the moment. Specifically, we're going to be talking about our undergraduate research scholarships and our graduate research fellowships. Our undergraduate research scholarships have a funding level of $8,000. Our graduate research fellowships have a funding level of $10,000. There are different requirements, which differentiates why they have different value, but I'll go into that in a little bit more detail on some future slides. I'd also like to point out that this year we're offering 14 awards for our undergraduate research scholarships and 18 for our graduate research fellowships. These are record levels of funding for us at Space Grant. So if you put in a really strong application, your chances of earning some funding this year are pretty good. I'm going to reiterate repeatedly that our applications are due 5 p.m. Friday, March 15th. And a few days after you submit, your faculty letter of recommendations are also due. There are no exceptions. Please do not wait until the last minute to submit. And I'm going to tell you why these things are important in some future slides. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about why we think it's a good idea for you to apply for a fellowship or a scholarship, but it's also important for you to hear from students about their experiences. So you don't have to take it from me, you can hear it from them. Donovan will not be here with us today, but Sage is here online. And I'm going to ask Sage to unmute herself and maybe share with you what was the deciding factor of why she decided to apply? What was her experience like with the application process? And although she's in the midst of her research experience as we speak, maybe she can share with you a little bit of what it's like once you actually get a scholarship. So Sage, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Sage. I'm a junior, I'm studying mechanical engineering. And for my research project, I'm working in structural mechanics, which for me looks like 3D printing a lot of different shapes and testing them. So it's very experimental. I would say my space grant experience so far has been really great. In terms of the application, it's a very streamlined application. You'll write kind of like a large research essay, and then some additional essays about, where you fit into the program. But I found it very approachable, and what kind of prompted me to apply was that I was already a part of a lab. I had done a little bit of research, but I was looking to kind of expand the work I was doing and maybe take a little bit more ownership of it. And so the ability to kind of write a research essay and have it reviewed by kind of a board of people just made sense. Sort of for me to make sense of my own thoughts on research and to get some feedback even. So that was kind of what motivated me. And so it kind of helped me clarify like my research question and what I would like to do. And so yeah, I highly encourage you to apply. The worst that can happen is you get a no, which if you're at a point where you can apply to the next cycle, I mean, then there's always that. And some people apply more than once, so there's nothing wrong with that. So it's really worth applying, and even if you don't get a scholarship, you've had that experience of articulating a research question, which is just valuable in academia. So yeah, that's sort of been my experience with the application. In terms of the research, I've felt very supported by the Space Grant program. They're mainly hands-off, I would say, kind of there when you need them, which is really nice. Yeah, so I've really just kind of been able to focus on my research and speaking with my advisor, and kind of building up to this milestone of the presentation in March. So
great, thanks, Sage. I'm going to share some tips and tricks about the application process in a few slides, but are there any tips or tricks or little bits of advice on the application process that you want to give our viewers a little quick nugget about?
Yeah, I mean, so do your research. So when you are thinking of what you might want to study in a certain field, and you reach a point where you're talking to a potential advisor, make sure you're informed, make sure that you really understand what you're trying to communicate to the readers, and they will be able to see your understanding in your writing. Your writing will become more clear the better you understand your subject. So do as much background work as you can, and try to get it reviewed by your advisor or somebody else, maybe even a graduate student. That would be a good idea. So that would be my number one piece of advice. And number two is to be excited, because a lot of the positive feedback that I received on my proposal was that my motivation to do the project felt very prominent in the writing. And so, when you're excited to do something and determined to do something, people can tell in your writing, and that can work in your favor.
I think that's absolutely the case. Thank you so much, Sage. I really appreciate you joining us today. And I don't know if you're applying for anything in the future, but of course, we wish you the best of luck and look forward to seeing you at the upcoming symposium. So thank you for your words of wisdom and advice. We appreciate it. All right, so moving on. A lot of this information is available online, as well as through the request for proposals, or the acronym RFP. You'll be hearing me refer to quite a bit. I'm going to go over a few of these points today, but whether you received information about this opportunity from social media or an email, happen to catch the link from someone, you had a PDF of the RFP sent to you. A lot of this information is available at our website. I'm going to walk you through our website as well as the application process in just a few more slides. But there are some key points that I wanted to go over with you all. So bear with me as we go through some of these slides. A lot of this is going to be addressing some frequently asked questions. So first and foremost, you have to be a U.S. citizen. This is a federal grant program funded by U.S. tax dollars. So you must be a U.S. citizen. If you are not sure if you are a U.S. citizen, I always say, do you have a U.S. passport? And are you eligible to vote for federal elections in the U.S.? If your answer is yes to those, obviously you are able to apply for this. If you are not sure, such as if you only have a green card, probably not. But you can always email me. My information is up on the website, on the pages for these opportunities. And so you can always ask me your personal question via phone or email. Your research must be relevant to what it is that we're asking for, and that is NASA. There is really nothing that NASA does not do. If you go on and do some research, you will notice that there's everything from astrobotany to rocket science to astronomy to astronaut health. NASA has their fingers in just about everything. So that car you're driving around, that map you're looking at, that GPS, well, that's NASA. Make sure that your work is relevant to something related to NASA. That can also include commercial space, research that's going on at the International Space Station. It can be in aviation. It can be in lab science. Sage gave you good advice. Just go on and do your homework. You must be studying a STEM field or pursuing a STEM degree. In some instances, obviously for undergraduates, that means a major. We understand that some schools don't have majors. They're called programs. It just must be STEM related for these specific funding opportunities. Yes, NASA does have funding opportunities that are non-STEM, that get the arts involved. However, this is not them. So you must be studying a STEM field. That's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Again, that's inclusive of anything like biology or physics. or health, or there's so many things. So go on and do your homework. According to NASA, you must have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA out of a 4.0 scale. We understand that some universities and colleges do not go by a GPA scale anymore. If you contact your academic office, they should be able to tell you how to convert your GPA. If they do not give you good advice for how to do that, feel free to reach out to our offices, but a lot of graduate schools, PhDs, job applications have a 3.0 scale, so your university should be able to provide you guidance for that. And we do confirm that through your transcripts. We do ask for, and in fact require, your most recent fall 2023 transcript. Obviously, we're in the middle of 2024 spring right now, so you do not have that transcript yet. But we do want to see your most recent fall transcript. We do understand that some of you may have had a bad fall semester and dipped below that 3.0 GPA a little bit. A cumulative GPA does count. I will show you in a little bit our online system. So if you have a cumulative 3.0 or higher, you can upload multiple transcripts. And I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. In order to receive a scholarship or fellowship, you must be enrolled full-time as of fall 2024. Yes, research is conducted starting over this summer, but the enrollment part of it has to start next fall and continue next academic year. And we'll talk about that a little in a few slides as well. You are eligible if you are in a community college 2+2 program. So let's say you're finishing up your second year community college and you're transferring to a 4-year. Yes, you are eligible. You may also be in an accredited dual engineering degree program. If you are working towards your master's or your PhD, and you're graduating as an undergraduate, you need to apply for the graduate program, not your current undergraduate program. So let's say I'm in my senior year, I'm a senior at App State. Next year, I'm going to go pursue my master's degree at NC State. You would not apply as an undergraduate at App State. You would apply for the graduate research fellowship being at NC State, because that's where you will be next year. Of course, in order to receive funding from North Carolina Space Grant, you have to be studying here at an accredited university or college in the state of North Carolina. You can be out of state. You can be from Virginia or California or anywhere across the state, but the school you go to has to be located in North Carolina. And finally, for both opportunities, whether you're an undergrad or grad, you can only receive up to 2 awards per category. So you can receive 2 undergraduates and 2 graduates, or 1 and 2, or 2 and 1. But for each type, you're only allowed to receive up to 2. All right, next slide. So here's some frequently asked questions that I want to get into. So these are called research scholarship and fellowship. And the purpose of that research is to help you gain new knowledge, skills, or abilities as part of your research. So whether the research you're conducting is unique, which we would obviously expect at a PhD level, or whether that knowledge and skills is new to you as an undergraduate in a lab working on something you've never done before, it has to be new to you, and you will be asked to articulate that in your essays. And we will touch upon those essays in just a slide or two. So it is a 12-month funding period, and 12 months of research is strongly preferred. And you will have to articulate that timeline and plan of study in your application. So yes, if it's a 12-month, we do expect, if you're bidding for a 12-month or proposing a 12-month, that you will start in the summertime. Obviously, especially for graduate students and PhD students, there's a lot of really intense research that goes on in the summer. And then you're kind of crunching your data and writing it up over the academic year. Conversely, if you're an undergraduate, you would want to use your summertime wisely, perhaps to work through that research plan with your advisor, maybe obtain samples, maybe book time in a lab, but you're going to want to use your summer wisely to set yourself up for success, because research can get a little bit daunting when you're trying to also do it with a full-time load during an academic year. So you're going to want to use your summer wisely. We do accept applications and proposals for abridged research periods, but remember that you're going to need to justify in your essays how you plan on getting stuff done in an abridged period of time. So for example, if you're a master's student and you're graduating early in December, or let's say you have an internship somewhere this summer that you really don't want to give up and you only want to do it for an academic year, that is fine, but you're going to have to explain how that timeline is going to work for you in that abridged period, and be competing against people who are going to be doing it for a full 12 months, to be honest. And I will make it perfectly transparent that if you're not researching in the summer, or if you graduate earlier, you are not paid for the time that you are not conducting research. There is a payment plan. You don't get it all in one lump sum. You get it as you go according to milestones. So if you're doing a bridge study, please be prepared that you don't get the full 8,000. You might get 6 instead, or whatever, or you might not get the full 10 as a graduate research fellow, but we just want to be transparent about that. Touched upon this a little bit earlier. Yes, you can go from undergrad to grad as long as you're enrolled for next year. It should say fall of 2024. I apologize for that mistake. So you should be accepted into a grad program, and we should know that you're going to be enrolled in that program as of next year. But again, if you're an undergrad now going to grad, you apply for the graduate fellowship, not the undergrad scholarship. Where should you be located? You can be located and do your research at your university. We know that there are times that a student may need to access a lab with an industry partner, a government facility. You may need to book time, maybe at an observatory or get a telescope that's somewhere else. That has to be included. That plan has to be included in your application or proposal. And you need to clearly articulate how you're planning to book that time in that lab, or better yet, confirm that you have that time already booked on that certain telescope, or getting a certain material sample. If, for example, if you're a geology student and you're looking for a sample from the moon. And I do have to say that whether you're from a small school or a large school, whether you're from a state school or a private school, whether you're at a minority serving institution or a historically Black college or university, all students are strongly encouraged to apply. We've got a lot of money on the table this year. This is really your chance to tell a story about yourself. We have awardees from all across the state at all different types of institutions. You can see links to past recipients on our website. And really, this is open to everybody, and we strongly encourage all to apply. Okay, so we're going to start getting into a little bit more meat of how to go about doing the application. And in just a few slides, I'm also going to walk you through the system. So first and foremost, we urge you to really carefully read our website and that RFP. You can read it online, or if you're like me, I like to print it out, highlight things, scratch notes on it. But we really encourage you to read it thoroughly before you apply. I am always happy to answer questions from students. But I will tell you, if you email me asking me a question and the answer to that question is on our website or in our RFP, I will tell you that information is in the RFP or on the website. Please go look there first. So make sure that you carefully read it and understand what is being asked of you, not only for your application, but as part of your scholarship or fellowship. And then, of course, follow the application instructions. Again, I will be showing you the online system where you fill out the information. And so you're going to want to make sure that you really follow those application instructions. I think Sage laid it out. She said it's pretty clear. It's not that hard to do, but just follow those instructions. You will be uploading things into an online portal. That means, of course, leaving time to fill out certain details on those forms that I will be showing you. So we need you to, for example, upload transcripts, put your contact information in, put your contact information of your advisor who will be writing you your letter of recommendation. And of course, like that takes a couple minutes here and there to do. So once you create your profile in your system, which again, I'm going to show you how to do, you can go in, put that information in, save it, and then go back and forth. But it does take time to do that. So, I mean, I do like to tease my students a little bit and say, you know, instead of going on that TikTok, like take a few minutes and do that for them instead. So essays, the next few slides are really, the next few boxes are really about the essays. It's really important that you review the sample essay questions, and I'm going to tell you why in a few slides, because that's where the points are, hint, hint. But we want you to really look at the questions and make sure that you're answering the questions. And these few boxes kind of tell you what they're about, whether it's about your research goals, it's about your methodology, it's about how it's connected to NASA or space grant, right? Sage told you to do your homework. We're going to talk about that. Or in the last two slides, whether you're talking more personally about yourself, make sure you're reading the question and answering the question, because that's how points will be scored. And I will tell you that in some past reviews of proposals we've gotten from our reviewers, they're good, they're professionals, they work at academic institutions. They can tell if you're cutting and pasting something, for example, from your professor, a grant your professor did. They can see that because they can tell it's not tweaked to what it is that you're doing as part of their lab or what the specific piece you're proposing is. So they really want to make sure that they're seeing it. Similarly, and this is a case I would say more so with grad PhD level, we understand that you're going to be applying to space grant, probably in addition to a number of other types of grants. And our reviewers can tell if you have just cut and pasted from a different type of application that doesn't answer our questions precisely. We're not saying you have to reinvent the wheel. We know that a lot of us kind of cut and paste and use our own source materials. What we are saying is please take the time to personalize them to the questions that you're being asked, tweak them a little bit, because again, you're going to learn how those points are scored. So do take the time to look at those essays and really look at the questions that are being asked of you. Sage said they're pretty straightforward. It's not hard, but you got to take the time to do it. So here's some of the tips that we have heard from past recipients. And from past reviewers that I want to go over with you. And some of these will overlap what it is that the advice that Sage has already shared with you. Tip number one, you heard it from Sage, go online and do your homework, right? What goes into a research plan? What goes into research methodology, right? That's really important if you're an undergrad and doing this for the first time. You're going to be asked a question about what is a NASA mission directorate? How is my research related to NASA? Like, you've got to figure that out and write to that. Similarly, if you've never heard of Space Grant before, who are we? What is it that we do? What is our strategic plan, right? You're going to also have to write like how you fit into what it is that NC Space Grant does. So click around again, put that TikTok away, go around and click on the NASA mission directorates, go through and click on NC Space Grant Strategic Plan. If you visit our website and you look at the website pages for the fellowship or the scholarship, there are links everywhere for those things. So take your time and poke around. Another tip we have heard from a lot of students is that it's really great to write a draft, and get feedback. So in the system, if you are a graduate, you will upload your essays as a PDF. If you are an undergraduate, you will upload, cut and paste your essays. But we strongly encourage you to write them in Word first, do your page counts, do your spell checks, give it to your advisor to review, give it to your fellow students in your lab. Or I love the advice that Sage gave you. Like maybe you have a graduate teaching assistant. Ask for help from people who you trust. And if you've not cultivated those relationships yet, guess what? This is a great way to start working with your peers. So ask for help. And if it's in a Word document rather than in our wonky system, it's a really easy way to do that. I mentioned that graduate students are going to upload PDFs for each essay. We've done this because at the graduate PhD level, we've noticed that their ability to include graphs and charts and images is really beneficial to them expressing their research. Whereas for undergrads, you're just going to cut and paste your essays in there without the use of charts and graphs and images, because as Sage explained to you, it was really helpful for her to figure out how to articulate her research ideas and what it was she wanted to do. And she accomplished that by putting pen to paper and writing it out. So great advice, Sage. Finally, your letters of recommendation. We get this a lot from the folks who write these letters. Do not ask them to write them at the last minute, right? The person who's writing you the letter of recommendation, and you do score points on these, needs to understand what you're doing, needs to understand their role in relationship to your research, whether you're an undergrad and it's really hands-on, whether you're a PhD and it might be relatively hands-off. They need to know if you need access to equipment in their lab, like that letter has to articulate what it is that your relationship and needs will be. And if you ask your advisor for that letter at the last minute, it's not going to be a very good letter. And again, you're going to score points on this. So ask them. We've heard that advisors like to know 3 weeks in advance, if possible. And so use this time wisely to cultivate that relationship with your advisor. If you don't really know what you want to research, well, what a better chance to cultivate that relationship with that person and use that person as a resource. So do contact them early. And again, do contact them often to remind them that they also have a due date for your letter. Okay, carrying on. Evaluation criteria. So this is earlier where we said pay attention to those essay questions because those essay questions you will see are reflected in these points. So your research goals, right? A lot of points are scored there, especially if you're an undergraduate. Like, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Your research plan. Graduates, we expect you to have a really detailed research plan. So you're going to score a lot of points there. Here you'll see again, you have to write to the alignment to NASA or commercial space or the International Space Station or some other mission or planet or non-planet, sorry, Pluto. And also you have to write to North Carolina Strategic Plan. There are points there. Then the essays get a little bit more personal. We're asking you about your academic and career pathway. Like, how is this research going to help you? Earlier, we talked about what knowledge, skills, and abilities are you learning as part of this? Like, this is your essay where things are more personal. And I think Sage said it really clearly that, like, this is where the reviewers get to see really what drives you, where your enthusiasm, where your passion is, and it lets us get to know a little bit more about you. So think about what it is that you're proposing and why. Honestly, saying something like, I need the money. Hey, that's fair. Let's say you're a first-time university student and if you didn't get this scholarship, you're going to have to do a work study. But if you get this scholarship, you won't have to do that. You'll be able to focus on your research more. You'll be able to buy lab equipment. Like, we want to hear that story from you about why this matters. And you're going to score points there. And then finally, you're going to see where those letter of recommendations that you're asking of your advisor matter, and they score points. So, write your essays to the points, make sure you're keeping this in mind. Not to freak anybody out, but we will tell you, people have missed a fellowship or a scholarship by like a point or two. And so we want you to not take anything for granted, and put your best foot forward. But I think Sage also said it best. Again, what we ask is pretty straightforward. And we're not asking for like long essays, right? We're asking for a couple pages here. There's word counts on the essays. We're not asking you for a lot. But we want it to be like nice, clear, and crisp, because we do send these to reviewers. I'll go ahead and speak to that right now. Each application is reviewed by no less than 3 external reviewers, right? It's not me, it's no one from my team. We would fund all of you if we could, but unfortunately we can't. And so we put this in the hands of trusted, again, professionals, and they could be from industry, they could be from NASA, they could be from academia, they could be other just really super smart people. And they're reading your essays, and they've got to respond to how you responded your essays, and they're scoring the points, and they add them all up. And all of that stuff is added up, and that's how you kind of get to, hopefully, if I've done my math right, 100%. So that's kind of how you're graded, so to speak, on how your application works. I am going to go back here. I'm going to exit, and hopefully, Sage, if you're still on, you can help me figure out if I am exiting my PowerPoint correctly and going into my website and my online application system. What I'm going to try to do here is stop my share momentarily. Hi, everybody. What I'm going to do is switch to our website so that I can show you what the website looks like and walk you through the application system. Okay, so I don't know if Sage, if you're able to give me a thumbs up or verbally let me know. Can you see my screen? Did it work?
Yes. Yeah, you're on the website.
All right. Hey, sometimes Zoom works. Remember last year Zoom didn't work. So like, we're on a roll today. Okay, so if you Google NC Space Grant or otherwise get to our website, this is what you're going to see. There's some pretty nifty stuff here, but I digress. What we're focusing on today is our higher education opportunities, notably the Graduate Research Fellowship and the Undergraduate Research Scholarship. I'm going to go ahead and click on Undergraduate Research Scholarship because I get to choose what I want. All right, so if you go to that opportunity, you're going to see our website where it reminds you of our deadline, again, tells you who can apply, reminds you what this is about, has links to everything you could possibly want to know through our request for proposals. RFP, you'll hear that term a lot in your career. It's a full PDF with all sorts of juicy information. I'm going to show you what a sample application, like what the system looks like in a little bit, but you can always see that here. This is a link to the actual application system where you will create your own login. Even if you've applied before, every year you have to create a brand new login. And then here's a link to some past scholars. If you're not sure, what's going on and what type of people apply and where they're from, or if you want to get an idea of like a research title, clicking on scholars is a really good place to look. So here on the website, it runs you through a lot of stuff we've talked about today, who we are, why we're doing this, the amount and number, who's eligible, right? We talked about this stuff, but if you're not sure, here it is at your fingertips. Deadlines in bold, right? Can't stress that enough. We've got some more application instructions for you. Remember the tip earlier we said is follow the instructions. Well, here they are. Make sure you're reading them. We've got the essay questions that you're going to be asked that you have to either cut and paste or upload into the system right here. Very clear instructions about what it is that we're asking you to do. I told you earlier to do your homework. Here's all the links to that juicy NASA stuff. as well as a little bit more about Space Grant. So you could research that in order to write that essay. More of the questions about telling us more about yourself, some instructions about when you get that faculty letter of recommendation, and a little advice to you to remind your advisor that they're going to get this email from the system. And I'm going to show you what they see in the system. So you're going to say, hey, advisor person, please make sure that you're looking out for this email from notices@spacegrant.net, because if you don't submit a letter of application, my application won't be reviewed. Then they're going to tell you a little bit more about transcripts. Again, reiterating about exactly where you're going to score points. And then finally at the bottom, right, I always say there's no such thing as free money. So there are some things that we expect from you about your research, including joining us at our symposium, our space symposium, creating a profile with NASA, sending us a final report, all sorts of fun stuff. But you can learn about what it is that we're asking from you on our website. And then finally, at the bottom is my contact information. You can email me or call me, and I will be happy to get back to you. So what I want to take the time to do at this point, scroll, is show you our sample application. So I'm first going to show you our application system. So when you go into the system, you're going to create your own unique login. And I told you before that you can go in and out of it as many times as you want. So let's say you take a couple minutes today and you upload your name and your contact information. And then, you know, when you get a copy of your transcript, you go upload that later. And then, okay, I've got my advisor, I'm going to go upload. You can go in and out of the system as many times as you want. And from this page, you can see the sample application, and I'm going to also show you the sample mentor letter of recommendation. But this is what our login page looks like. I'm actually going to go ahead and click on the sample application from this page so I don't have to scroll back. So this is exactly what our application system looks like. So again, make sure you're in the right place. This is where your contact information is going to be. Make sure that I would recommend here that for your name and your address, often we like to see your school address, but if you really don't check it that much, that's fine. If you've got a Gmail or a Hotmail or whatever else, just put all your contact information here. Congressional district, this is more about us than you. We are trying to make sure that we're reaching students who come from across the state. So we just want to learn like where you're from. There's a lookup, really easy verification that you're a US citizen. Right, so then you're going to take a couple more minutes. Where do I go to school? For this box, the only tricky part is like if you are currently like a senior undergrad and you're going to grad school, this box, obviously you'll be applying for the graduate research fellowship, not the undergrad. But if you're a senior going to grad school next year, this box should be the school that you plan on going to be enrolled at next year, not the school you're in now. These boxes are called majors and minors. Again, we know that not everybody has a minor. We also know that at some schools it's called programs. That's fine. You get the gist of what those boxes should say. Standing, just where are you going to be? Like, are you a sophomore, junior, senior? We don't typically have freshmen apply, but we can talk about that if you are one. You're just going to drop down there. Expected graduation date. If you're not sure, ballpark it, no big deal. GPA, this is where you're going to be on that 4-point scale that we talked about earlier, that if you have a school that doesn't have a GPA scale, call your academic office. Here's where you're going to want to take a few minutes and like go ahead and request now from your university or universities. For example, if you're in a 2+2 community college, you're going to want to upload maybe just your last semester if you have a 3.0 and your GPA is cool. Or if you kind of dinked it last semester and you need a cumulative 3.0 GPA, you have the ability to upload multiple PDFs there. So all of that stuff is going to take a few minutes. So take some time before you start to tackle your essays and everything and just create that profile. Underneath here, this is where you're going to put your research mentor. So research mentor means like who's going to be your faculty advisor while you're doing your research. And that is going to be the name of the person. So one question I get a lot is like, Well, what happens if I'm kind of doing my research at a continuation of like a NASA internship that I have? So it's really a NASA person, but I'm back at school and I'm doing my research at school. Who should be my mentor? Someone at your university has got to know what you're doing, right? So even if you're carrying on work that is still being done with NASA, like you're still doing it as part of your university, and you should find an advisor that is your academic advisor at your school. So you're just going to plop all their contact information in here. And then we finally kind of get to the essay part at the bottom. Again, for graduates, it's going to look slightly different because you're going to upload an individual PDF per question. Undergraduates, you have the ability to cut and paste in these boxes, but you're going to start with your title. My advice, keep it short, direct, like make sure your reader automatically knows like what it is you're doing by your title. If you're not sure what a title should be, I showed you a box earlier on the web page where you can go back and see what folks did last year. So you can get a feel for what their titles are by looking at some of our past research. You're going to pop your title in. You're going to cut and paste your essays here, right? They've got word counts. These aren't like, 20-page things. These are, do your word counts. It's not too many words when you really try to express yourself. It'll go by pretty quickly. But you'll see the essays that you're scored points on, and these are where your essays will go into the boxes. And here you'll see why it's important that a SAGE advise you, go do your homework, go do your research, because you're going to need to say which mission directorate your research is aligned to. If you have a secondary, great. If you don't have a secondary, that is fine too. Here's your essay where you're going to get to talk about yourself. Like, what am I interested in? Why am I pursuing this? What are my academic and career goals? Like, these are your essays that SAGE told you that you get a chance to really express yourself and why it is that you're doing what you're doing, right? So your first two essays are like very specific about your research and your methodology. And then your next couple essays are going to be a little bit more personal to you, so we understand why this scholarship or fellowship is important to you. Your location, we just want to know, like, are you going to be at a university doing research, or do we need to know that you're off at a NASA center or somewhere else? Finally, you're just going to tell us a little bit more about, like, we need to know if you've gotten space grants before. We need to look at other federal grants that you may be getting. There are some grants where you are allowed to overlap by getting federal funds. There are some grants you're not allowed to overlap getting two types of federal funding. So we just have to look at your current scholarships, fellowships, and loans and things. And again, we're asking you if you've had a space grant, because we've told you you can only get two, and that's fine. So we give you space for all of that. And then here at the bottom, you'll see a space for optional information. We do request that you answer these questions if you're open to that. Again, this is more about making sure that we are reaching all types of students from across the state, and that we're looking at where you're from, what your background is, your gender identity, all of that. Like, we just want to make sure that we're doing a good job reaching students. That's what this field is about. So again, it's more about us than about you. Secondly, I would like to express that NC Space Grant understands that you are, whether your gender, your race, your ethnicity, you are more than a radio button or a drop-down box. We know that not all of you fit in any of these boxes. These are the federal categories. This is what we have to collect. If you become an awardee, we ask you questions a little bit more personally about yourself, where you can, share with us race and gender identity. But for federal purposes, we collect these boxes. And again, it's optional. This does not matter on your application. It's just really about making sure that we're reaching people as the way that we think we are. And then finally, we do ask you, how did you hear about us? Because we want to see like what's working and what's not. So if you don't all mind just taking a few minutes to click and write, it really helps Space Grant be better. And then the last thing we'll ask you to do is just certify, right? This is the money for nothing box, right? So you're going to have to submit a final report. You're going to present a poster, all the things that we're asking you to do. It's like, yep, I'm doing this, and I get that if I actually get the scholarship, I got to do stuff. So that's all what these boxes are for. So that's what our system looks like. It's pretty straightforward, like Sage said. It's not that complicated, but go ahead and take your time to familiarize yourself with it, and that will pay off in the long term. I did also want to be transparent and show you what it is that your mentor or your advisor or the person who writes you your letter of recommendation will see. This is exactly what that person is going to see. So you saw on the last page where you write in your advisor's name and their email and their contact information. Once you submit, and only once you submit, will that person get their request from our system to go ahead and enter their letter of recommendation. So they're just confirming their contact information, and then they're going to copy and paste their letter here. So why do I bring all of this up? If you wait until the deadline day and submit, which you can, that's your business. If you are a procrastinator, however, that means you are leaving a very limited amount of time for your advisor to then go in and upload their letter. So what I would suggest you have them do is, hey, advisor, can you start drafting your letter now so that all you have to do is cut and paste it in the system, and it's a beautiful letter and we've both read it together and like we're on the same page. That way you're not jamming them up, having to input it at the last minute, and you're also letting them know, hey, you might want to draft this in Word first so that the first time you try to craft this letter is not in their system. So you might want to have those conversations with your advisor. And so we just wanted you to see exactly what it is that they're going to see so that there's no secrets in terms of what it is we're asking them. And then same thing, they're just going to certify that they're going to supervise you. They're going to make sure that you submit a final report to us and all of that good stuff. So in short, that's what our system looks like. It's pretty basic, nothing much to hide there, but we just wanted to make sure that you saw it and that you got familiar with our system. I'm going to show you one last thing finally. Again, if you're interested in what our researchers have done, student researchers this last year, there's a similar link on our graduate page, so you can see what folks have done in the past. You can also see like, oh gosh, how do I write a title? These are some of our students from last year, where they're from and how they've crafted their own titles. Hey, there's Sage. Hi, Sage. How they've crafted their own titles for their research. So that should help with that. I think that's about all I'm going to show you on that today. I'm going to take a quick pause and check the comments to see if there's any questions. If not, I do have a few more slides to share on other funding opportunities with NC Space Grant. So bear with me as I'm stopping the share. I'm just going to quickly check that chat. Okay, we're clear on the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and start again sharing my slides so that you can just see what else NC Space Grant has for you. So bear with me just a minute here. Okay, going back to sharing my screen. Okay, you should be able to see that now. All right, so I'm going to blow this up here if it decides to do it. Okay, so I also wanted to make everybody aware of the NASA internships are available. The deadline for summer internships has already passed, but there are opportunities for internships that are always available at NASA, including the academic year. If you are interested in obtaining an internship with NASA, you will apply at intern.nasa.gov. There is an online system, a portal that you would have to apply to. We strongly encourage you to create a profile at that website and search for the types of internships that NASA has. and apply, apply, apply. You never know. We've had quite a few students apply, think they weren't going to get it, and they've gotten a NASA internship, and it has been life-changing. So even if you missed the deadline for this summer, go on and look what opportunities are still open. There are a number of other types of opportunities that are going to be open in the fall. Let's say you're not as into independent research, but you're really excited doing something as part of a team. There are a number of universities who receive funding to participate in a NASA or other competition. Those teams are up on our website for this current academic year. You can join one of those teams. Next year, if you don't see your team listed, we've had a lot of students go to their advisors and say, hey, why don't we have a team competing for this? And universities have started new teams. So if the team thing is more your thing, be aware that those are out there. Also, if you are an early undergrad or an undergrad at either a minority serving institution or a historically Black college or university, we do have unique scholarships that are available at select institutions that fall under an MSI or an HBCU. They're not open right now. Again, they'll be open in the fall. But if you're curious about what they are, you can still go onto our website and see what those are all about. And those, all of these will be open in the fall of next academic year. Finally, again, if you decide to do a scholarship or a fellowship or join a team or whatever, that's great. If it's not for you, but you're still interested in space and networking with like-minded people, meeting folks for NASA, everybody is invited to register for our 2024 North Carolina Space Symposium. Registration should be opening in a week. We've got an amazing agenda this year, and you will be trained in open source science by actual NASA professionals coming to North Carolina to train you in their open science resources. That event will take place on March 22nd at McKimmon Center in Raleigh, North Carolina. We encourage you to come or get a van full of students to come with your department. And again, come meet students, come meet NASA professionals, and stay tuned because you will be learning about registration soon. So you can follow North Carolina NC Space Grant in social media or check back on our website under our events for when registration will open. I will say it is normally an event like this would cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars to register and be able to attend. But students, I think your cost is usually around $35 to attend this. And yes, you get fed too. So there's not a better opportunity for students interested in space than our own NC Space Symposium. And finally, if you want to learn more about NC Space Grant, there's lots of opportunities that we share with students that we send out through social media, we send out through faculty advisors, they're up on our website. But we strongly encourage you to follow us on social media so you can hear more about the opportunities that are currently open and so much more. So I'm going to wrap up for today and respect everybody's timeline. We're just about at the stopping point. If you do have any questions, you'll find my contact information. My name is Sandra Canfield. I go by Sandy. You'll find my contact information at the bottom of the opportunity websites or under about our team. You are welcome to reach out to me anytime by email, by telephone, and ask questions about these or other opportunities with North Carolina Space Grant. So with that, I'm going to conclude for the day, and I am excited about the opportunity for you all to apply and wish you the best of luck on your applications. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And I will say that, yes, I just got one question into the chat. Just got in the nick of time. Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, there will be an NCC Space Grant this year. The subject matter is going to be slightly changed this year. We should be releasing that on or just after February 15th. So stay tuned for information about the Sea Space Grant. It's coming out very shortly and we're really excited about it this year. So I will ask then any last questions in the chat or that anybody has. You're welcome, Rebecca. Okay, well, if there are any questions out there, again, feel free to email me, and I am so excited about the opportunity to have you all become part of the Space Grant family. All right, good luck on your applications, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.